All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Bob Whalen. Bob, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
So great to be here, Kevin. I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. And you and I, we already got to have a conversation and get to know each other a little bit. Man, I've really been looking forward to this. And plus, just the way we got connected, because I have to give a shout out. I don't have to. I want to give a shout out to Jamie Dykstra because she is such a rock star and she's such got such a huge heart. She's a total badass at what she does. I mean, of course, with you, I'm speaking to the choir. And
Absolutely.
so, and so you've experienced it firsthand for yourself, and that I think it's so cool. You are so. She helped you write your book,
She
and
did.
and you were so appreciative of her role in that you gave her props right on the front cover of your book and stuff. And
Yeah, but I wouldn't have been able to do it, otherwise. I can't imagine, having a co-writer that does the lion's share of the actual writing, and Jamie's true gift is finding, the author's voice.
yeah,
Like when my wife read the book, she felt like I wrote it. And that's saying something.
wow.
And Jamie was so awesome from that. There's no way I could have, with the straight face, gone out and promoted a book that I wrote and acted like I did it by myself.
Yeah.
And so Jamie was key to that. And it does great work for us here every day at HB Global. So, so thrilled. That we got to know each other and a graduate finance program at Notre Dame, and down the road has led to this, relationship where she does just a ton of communications work for us here at HB Global.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And and when you get introduced, that's how you and I got introduced was by Jamie. And when you get introduced by someone that, you have such respect and admiration for, and so do I, well, when that person makes an introduction and says, "Hey, you two guys need to meet," well, we're both well, Jamie, if you're saying this, I'm in, you know. It's,
I've never turned one of those down yet.
yes,
In my
yeah.
56 years, not one time when you have a good, friend, you ever turn down. When they say you need to meet somebody, you drop everything and you do what you need to
Yes.
do.
Yeah.
And so, that's the power of relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Jamie, if you happen to be listening to this, you got two big, huge fans right here.
No doubt.
so, so, well, Bob, we're just going to start off. We're just have a heart-to-heart conversation here today. We're going to talk about your business and what you do and a lot of different things. But I'll just start off with nice, simple, at least on my part, really simple, easy question to ask. Maybe more challenging for you to answer. I don't know. But what do you do and who do you serve?
Uh, what I do is I am the CEO of HB Global, which is an employee-owned holding company, predominantly of mechanical contracting and service businesses. So we service your HVAC, your plumbing, your electrical needs, and build structures also. So we build and service. Uh, but who I serve is a little unique from a lot of business owners in that I serve the employees that work for us.
Okay.
So the employees of HB Global own the company through an employee stock ownership plan. And that's who I view as the primary folks that I service. And we certainly have customers that are incredibly important, and that's all integrated into the vision of how we go about doing our business. But when you ask me who I serve our employees.
You know what a cool place to come from. And I can only imagine how many employees do you guys have?
2,500.
25. That's a pretty good number of employees.
Yes, it
and
is.
and I bet those employees feel different about the place that they work than a lot of other employees might feel at other places that are available to work at.
We work really hard to instill an ownership mentality, not just that they get true ownership through the employee stock ownership plan, But we work really hard to have our employees act like owners,
Yeah.
and so we do a lot of communication about what we're trying to accomplish from that perspective. But we believe it leads to better outcomes, for their own satisfaction, but also that our customers get a better product, get better service in the end, feel better about the company that they work with. And that's what I'm most proud of. When my kids were playing high school sports and I would walk into a sporting event, and a customer pull you aside and say, what great work your company has done for me, that's a proud moment for me. And to this day, I still haven't walked into a sporting event, where somebody pulls me aside and said, your company's screwing up, and so that's what comes from our employee owners really taking ownership of what they do.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you get into like even because I mean when I was a kid I wanted to be a fireman. I didn't end up being a fireman. I get to do what I do now, which is in my mind way better than being a fireman. And so how did this all come to be for you? What is your backstory, Bob? And how did you get even into doing this?
Well, the origin story really starts, with I did an MBA between 2002 and 2004. And I came out of that MBA really wanting an opportunity to lead a business. And my thesis of how to do that was to run it like a sports team.
Okay.
So if you get everybody running in the same direction, that you can outperform maybe better athletes by working better as a team. So it's a very team-oriented structure. And so fast forward a couple of years and we'll get back to how I ended up, getting into this
Okay.
opportunity. But I got an opportunity at really an iconic business in central Pennsylvania, which is HB McClure Company.
Okay.
Has blue and gold trucks running all over the community. And I saw them when I was a little kid. The business was actually, when I came in, 94 years old.
Wow.
So a multi-generation, well established. I knew almost nothing about construction and service, but was looking to put my, business education to work and leading a business. And that's how I got the company. And, you know, that was April of 2008. We were in recession and didn't know it.
Yeah.
And I bought
Yeah.
a minority interest in the business with using the cash flows of the business to buy the rest, and just came to the conclusion that that was going to be very traumatic on our employee base. The owner, Bob McClure, who I describe as the absolute best former owner, any acquirer of a business could ever have. He was willing to be patient. He didn't, need us to pay him back really quickly. I just felt it was going to be relatively traumatic on the business. So we went looking for ways to make that more efficient. When
Okay.
you go to make it look, when you go for efficiency, the first thing you look at is tax. That led me to ESOPs. The value of an ESOP is you don't pay any federal tax. And so it creates a bunch of capital that you can use for the transition. And so in October 2010, we sold the business, my minority interest and Bob's majority interest, to an ESOP trust to buy the company. And little did I know it that, my whole professional mission would change based on that action. And so now my whole mission is around creating value for our employee owners. And like I said, I work for them. They're who I serve. I got 2,500 bosses in a sense, in that I'm trying to serve them and create value for them. And that's what we've gone about doing for the last 15 years.
Wow. Wow. And now, you've got this book out, and now you're helping other companies do this. Am I correct in that?
Yes, so the book Beyond Your Ownership, the target audience of that book is really any business owner that's looking for their succession plan.
Okay.
And so there's a multiple ways that you can do a succession. Family businesses are great. Obviously there's public companies, private equities out there buying company, but there's this little known approach to succession of a business, which is to sell it back to your employees.
Okay.
And that's what the book is all about. It's really trying to create awareness for what they're calling the silver tsunami, that there's going to be about 10 million businesses, over the next decade that need to transact to somebody else.
Okay.
And I just want those owners to be aware of this tool because one of the things that I think people have realized is oftentimes when a seller sells their business, they become very disenchanted with what happens to it afterwards.
Okay. Mhm.
And one way to, continue the legacy of what you've done, give back to the employees that helped get you there, is to actually sell the business back to the employees and really stay engaged in the business and help transition the culture, what you do, the legacy of the business onto the next generation that's already part of it. And what we find is that leads to a much higher level of satisfaction with the transaction. You feel good about what you've done. Bob McClure can feel good that the median balance of the employees that were there when we sold to an ESOP in 2010 is over $500,000.
Okay.
And that's because of his action.
Yes.
Him being willing to sell back to his employees has created the opportunity for the employees to create this wealth for himself. And, he can be very proud of what he's done. The blue and gold trucks are still running around Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The leadership of that division is still making decisions about how to operate in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And we're giving tremendous wealth back to the communities for which all of these businesses that we've acquired over the last 15 years for where they started. So just as an example, there's over $215 million worth of value in the accounts of people that live in Pennsylvania, which is where our roots are from, where we
Okay.
started, where the early acquisitions are from. And so that is something we are incredibly proud of. And
Yeah.
those employees, when they retire, those resources are going to be poured right back into the community where they've grown and lived for their whole life. And we're really proud of that.
Yeah. Wow. What a phenomenal story. So who are the kinds of people? So I'm listening to you and I'm thinking like maybe like people who, you know, help uh, uh, entrepreneurs prepare their business for sale and stuff. Like, do you know, do they typically, because me personally, I had never heard of an ESOP before I met you and stuff. Do those people typically know about this?
Well, that's one of the big things, and it is that there's a real effort around letting those resources know about ESOPs, and I would say those resources are your accountants, your attorneys, those folks that you respect in your life that are giving you advice about your business, and they have a tendency to be the most likely candidates to do that. So, part of this education is around, letting the accounting profession know about it. Now, they do have some understanding of ESOPs already in general because there's a valuation component to the businesses that are ESOPs that the accounting community is really involved in.
Okay.
So the same types of people that are like doing valuations of property and businesses for estates and charity and other things are the same people that can value businesses for ESOPs. And so there's some awareness there. Attorneys, on the other hand, the specialists in ESOPs obviously know about ESOPs,
Yep.
but there's a whole bunch of just family attorneys that really aren't aware of ESOPs. And that's part of, the universe that we're trying to educate through this book, that it's a real opportunity out there. And there is some, really great tax advantages for sellers of businesses. It's called a 1042 transaction where you can literally essentially eliminate capital gains tax that you have for selling your business if you sell it to an ESOP through a 1042 transaction, which is very technical and well beyond the pale, of this conversation.
Yeah.
But if you go to an expert and say, "Hey, I'm interested in doing an ESOP 1042 transaction," they're out there, can help you through it. And it's much like a 1031 transaction in real estate. So you'll hear people talk about selling one property and buying another
Another.
property with a
Yeah.
1031 transaction.
Yeah.
A 1042 is very, very similar to that.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. So, what's your vision for the company and your 2,500 employees going forward from here?
Well, my vision, for the company is, for one that I hope to never see, is that this business will live long beyond my years. Just like we've, lived from the first generation McClure that started HB McClure, we've lived long past, his life and what he could actually see, at least from here.
Yeah.
And, I'd like to see that the business continues to serve our communities, continues to serve our employees, and really is a permanent part of the communities that we're all part of.
Yeah.
And we've already been around for more than 100 years. So we're now, 112 years old. And I'd like us to be around at least another 112 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. Well, okay, so now that we've got some context set here and people have a little bit of an idea about who you are and what you're all about, Bob, I want to switch gears just a little bit. And I want to start talking about the relationship side of all this. So, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Yeah. So this whole story, really came about starting now, 40 years ago.
Okay.
40 years ago, I was helping my father-in-law out by caddying for him and his partner in a golf tournament. And that partner was Mark Caldwell. Caldwell, fast forward 20 years from there, was on the board of HB McClure, and they were looking for Bob McClure's succession plan.
Okay.
And, Mark and I, over time, got to know each other better. We were on a charity board together at one point, but unsolicited from me, Mark came to me and said, "Hey, we're looking for a succession plan for HB McClure. Would you have any interest?" Well, and of course, I was ecstatic to just be in the conversation.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, Bob McClure's initial reaction was not, to hire me as a successor for the business, to look for somebody in the industry, which I totally understood. But fast forward 6 months later, I'm looking at another business. I go to Mark McClure to consider, doing some funding for that business. And he comes back to me and said, "Hey, would you be interested? Some things have changed at HB. Would you be interested?" I said, "Of course I would be." And that was really the onus that got this all started. And so this is a wonderful opportunity for me to give Mark a shout out for what he's done in my life. I've had multiple opportunities almost over the last 20 years to do that, and I do it every chance I get because he has, that one decision to invite me into HB McClure from purely, from a professional standpoint for sure, it has had the biggest impact on my life.
Yeah.
Nothing compares really to that one introduction, which started with hustling on a golf course, taking care of raking bunkers.
Yeah. I say all the time that one relationship can completely change your life. What a perfect example of that. In fact, this show, 400 episodes, perfect examples of that. You know?
Well, and Kevin, I think the other thing is, those relationships are built over a long period of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
and if you're not willing to put the effort in the short terms,
Exactly.
the thing that's going to happen for you 20 years down the line is unlikely to happen. And are we perfect? Do we always put the effort into every single relationship we should? No, it's probably not even possible to do it,
Yeah.
but it does go to show you, most things in life come by doing, the disciplined, approach, consistently over a long period of time.
Yeah.
And that relate, there in our relationship that started with me carrying Mark's golf bag, there's been some things that I've done to help him out over times. Much more has come back my way, but it's helped frame this whole, my whole approach is to give more than I receive.
Yeah.
And Mark showed me that. I've had, multiple other people in my life that show that. And I think, it's one of those foundational things. If you figure that out early, it's going to lead, to a lot of good things for you down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I know you had one other person that you wanted to honor too, and I don't want to I want to make sure we give you time to do that too.
Yeah, this is a little different because, when I was in high school, I turned out wrestling in college, and not because I wanted to wrestle, but because I was better at wrestling than I was at football.
Okay.
And there was a local high school football coach that, unsolicited by me, reached out to William and Mary College and said, "Hey, you should really take a look at this guy."
Wow.
He was injured most of his senior year. I know there's not a lot of film on him, but I've watched him play for a long time. I think, he would be a great asset to your football program. I ended up, not playing for William and Mary, but Ray Erdy, who was the coach of Carlisle, High School, at the time, made that recommendation to that coach, and I never forgot about it. And my coach, Bob Craig, lived that every day.
Yeah.
He was known around here for not only helping the kids that played for him, but helping any athlete that wanted his help. At the end of wrestling season, all the local high schools would come together to practice together because you only had a wrestler or two on the team that was going on to the next week in the state championship system. And he helped anybody that was in that room that wanted help, and that was a lesson to me just about giving, and then, my number two daughter was a pole vaulter. She had a coach, Matt Buchanan, who he like got a lot of grief because he was the pole vaulting coach at our local high school, but was willing to help anybody at any time if they wanted his help because he ran a club that had the best pole vaulters around. And so he was always willing to help. And I think it was just a lesson for me, not only in sports and not only in business, but really anything, if there's anything you can do through your experience or wisdom to help somebody else, to take that, and you get so much joy out of that,
Yeah.
Kevin. I mean,
Yeah.
why is this employee ownership thing so great for me? It's the joy I get by seeing what we're doing for our employees first, but the
Right.
communities we live in, secondly, for the customers we serve. That's, you get more than what you give. And
Yeah.
so, give freely.
Yeah. You know, I've had so many conversations about this whole topic of giving and receiving, and and I personally I don't know a better feeling in the world than the one that comes from giving to somebody who just really appreciates it. That is the most amazing feeling, and it's like when you have that feeling, you're just like, man, I just want to have more of that feeling, and
Well, it's so exciting, having grown up in the town that I live, a lot of people and a lot of because we're, probably the biggest service provider, for residences in the area.
Mhm.
I get a lot of unsolicited feedback, from people that I know about their experience with our technician.
Okay.
And that's the one that, those are the ones that I appreciate the most because a lot of those people will go out of their way not to let them know that they know Bob Whalen.
Uh-huh.
They'll just start they've heard about this employee ownership thing and they'll just start probing, and to hear the stories about our technicians, gushing about what our company has done for them and, the way that this program has given their, retirement security. It just, really warms my heart.
Yeah.
And at some point, I don't know when that was, but you start to realize that you get joy from doing this, and it just
Yes.
encourages you to do it more and more and more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for anybody that's listening to this and thinking to themselves, man, Kevin, I really like Bob. I love who he is. I love how he shows up. Man, he's got such a heart for giving, such a heart for service and stuff. Um, any websites, any resources we can share with people? I mean, definitely your book and stuff for anybody who might like be interested to know more or hear more about some of the stuff you've been sharing here.
Yeah, really, all things ESOP, I make myself available, really to anybody.
Okay.
So go through our website. We'll do that. We have been known. We will talk about to owners. So there's really two ways you could become an ESOP. You can either start your own ESOP. So you can get your own professionals to help you set up an ESOP for yourself, which is what we did.
Okay.
Or you could sell your company to another ESOP. We'll be talking to companies about acquiring them, and we bring up, that they could start their own ESOP too. And we've had a number of companies that we're in discussions with to acquire, and then we act as a resource for them to help them. We just want companies, where it makes sense to become an ESOP, whether it's selling to us or doing it on their own. More than happy to be a resource for that. More than happy to talk about the resources we use and give recommendations relative to ESOP resources from evaluation or legal, or any of the perspectives. Because I just think our communities are better the more employee ownership that we have.
Yeah. So does a company need to be of a certain size in order for this to make sense for them? Or can any company do it regardless of how
Only
big?
from the perspective of having your own ESOP.
Okay.
And I would say when you talk about being of size, it really means that you have to get tax savings from doing it that is equal to or greater than the frictional cost of doing the ESOP. And an ESOP, is multiple hundreds of $1,000s to set up, and then it probably costs you, 75 to $100,000 a year just to operate. So
Okay.
you have to have a certain amount of profit.
Yep.
There is no threshold in selling to an already existing ESOP. And there are ESOPs in every industry you can imagine. And there's a whole bunch of ESOPs that are holding companies that have multiple different businesses. So we've acquired residential service businesses, for example, that have two, three, four, five employees. So they're
Also
not
much
making
smaller
nearly,
companies.
yeah, they're not making nearly the profit, but as a company, we can acquire them and they get the benefit of being part of an ESOP, as part of our company.
Okay. And so are there specific kinds of companies then that you're looking quite, is it all like home service related? Like, is it roofers? Is it, what kind of companies are you looking to acquire?
We're looking to diversify, so we're interested in all kinds of different, but our primary business is mechanical service and construction, both commercial and residential.
Okay. 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 So that can comprise a lot of different kinds of businesses for sure. So and
It sure can. And just a couple of examples, we're in the 5G infrastructure business. We run fiber optics cable. We do real estate management in a company that we're part of. We do residential new construction, subcontracting businesses, a number of stucco painting, drywall, a lot of different services in that area. So we're interested in a whole gamut of different businesses. They tend to be related to construction and real estate, but I would not say that that's our, exclusively the only things we would be interested in.
okay. Okay. Well, I'll tell you. Well, let me ask you this. Is there any last thing that you feel led to share before we call it a wrap and before I button up here?
No, I think this has been a great conversation. Really has given me, an opportunity to talk about my passion, which
Yeah,
is employee ownership. I just look forward to helping anybody that's interested in employee ownership. So, please feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to help in any way I can, whether it's me personally or connecting you with somebody that can help you.
absolutely. Well, Bob, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today, man. I just really appreciate you. I love your energy. I love your passion for what you're doing. It comes through just loud and clear. And for me personally, I mean, you opened my mind when we had our first conversation before we did this interview, and now you've opened it even a lot more. Now you really got me thinking. And so I appreciate that as well. And so,
Well,
and
good. I've enjoyed it very much, and have just enjoyed the conversation.
yeah, same. And I am looking forward to getting this out there. And so, yeah, if you're listening to this, show notes are down below. Links are there to their website and as well as to the book. And yeah, so thanks again, Bob. And bye for now, everybody.
Thank you.